Imagine you're standing here in a trench. Cold, thick mud sucks at your boots. The air is heavy, filled with the smell of gunpowder and death. Above you, the sky is a flat, bruised gray, with no sign of the sun. The constant roar of artillery shakes the very ground you stand on. Your world has shrunk to this narrow ditch, this muddy strip of earth where any second could be your last. You hear at first a high-pitched whistle, getting louder, closer. Before you can even think to move, an explosion rips through the air nearby, throwing dirt, shrapnel, and chaos everywhere. You don't know if you'll survive the next minute, let alone the day, but you have to try. You must. It is July 1st, 1916. This is the Battle of the Somme, a day that will be carved into history as one of the most brutal ever recorded. On this single day, the British Army suffered over 57,000 casualties, with nearly 20,000 men killed. The ground itself seems to cry out under the weight of such loss. As soldiers fall by the dozens, their blood mixing with the mud in a horrific, endless dance. The battle has only just begun, but the horror of these first few hours has already defined what is to come. This is a day of unimaginable sacrifice, a day that will forever alter the course of history. But why? What led to this catastrophic loss of life? What were the men and their commanders thinking as they prepared to go over the top? World War I was a conflict unlike any before it. A brutal war of attrition, where massive armies were thrown against each other in battles that stretched for miles, creating a relentless meat grinder of death. For 2 long years, the Allies and the Central Powers had been locked in a bloody stalemate along the Western Front. The promise of a decisive victory always seemed just beyond reach. New technologies, from machine guns to poison gas, were revolutionizing warfare. The old tactics, brave men marching in formation toward entrenched enemies, were stubbornly still in use. On this fateful morning, as the sun rose over the fields of northern France, something went terribly, tragically wrong. This battle, this single deadliest day, was not a random event. It was the result of months of planning, of flawed strategy, and a devastating underestimation of what modern warfare had become. The British High Command, desperate for a breakthrough, launched a massive offensive. They were confident that a week-long artillery bombardment, the largest the world had ever seen, had shattered the German defenses and cut the barbed wire. They believed their soldiers would simply be able to walk across no man's land and take the German trenches. They could not have been more wrong. As the artillery barrage lifted, the whistles blew, and along a 15-mile front, thousands of British soldiers climbed out of their trenches. They advanced into a living hell they could never have prepared for. The German defenders, deep in their fortified bunkers, had largely survived the bombardment. And as the British soldiers advanced, they were waiting, ready to unleash a storm of machine gun fire and artillery that would cut down the attackers in waves. In this video, we will witness the horrors of the Somme as if we were there. We'll feel the fear, the courage, and the heartbreaking futility that defined this bloody day. From the generals in their distant headquarters who ordered the attack, to the soldiers drowning in the mud, to the families back home who would wait for letters that would never arrive. The Battle of the Somme was a turning point. But what made this specific day so devastatingly costly? And how did the decisions of a few men seal the fate of so many? This is the story of that day, the deadliest day of World War I, and how it changed the war and the world forever. Thank you for joining me, and if you find this history as important as I do, please consider subscribing for more stories like this. July 1st, 1916. Dawn is breaking, but the world holds its breath in an eerie, unnatural quiet. For days, the British artillery has pounded the German lines along the Somme. The ground has shuddered, and the air has been thick with the smell of gunpowder. Everyone knows something big is coming. In the trenches, the men are grimy, exhausted, and anxious. They've seen friends fall. They've endured the deafening roar of the bombardments. But they can't truly comprehend the scale of what is about to happen. You're standing there, feeling the heavy wool of your uniform, your warm breath misting in the cool morning air. The tension is so thick you could cut it with a knife. A radio crackles somewhere in the distance. Men whisper prayers. The moment is drawing closer. The sky above is a grim, muted gray, reflecting the mood below. And then the bugle sounds. Officers gather, their faces set like stone, giving their final orders. At 7:30 a.m., over 100,000 British infantrymen will go over the top. The plan is to break the German lines, end the stalemate, and win the war. For a brief heart-stopping moment, the artillery falls silent. The air is still. Then, a whistle shrills, a deafening sound that seems to rip through the very fabric of reality. This is it. You take the first step, climbing out of the trench, leaving its muddy safety behind. Around you, thousands of others do the same. You have no idea what lies ahead, but there is no turning back. The British High Command is optimistic. They believe a week of non-stop shelling has obliterated the German defenses. They believe the barbed wire is cut, the machine gun nests are destroyed, and the enemy's spirit is broken. But they have tragically underestimated the brutal efficiency of modern warfare. As you and your comrades step into no man's land, a horrifying truth reveals itself. The German positions, though battered, are largely intact. The barbed wire is still a tangled, deadly obstacle. And hidden in the shadows, the machine guns are waiting. You march forward, trying to ignore the sinking feeling in your stomach. The weight of your rifle is a heavy burden. The ground is unstable, a mess of mud and craters. You stumble, but force yourself onward. To hesitate is to die. The first wave advances in neat rows, a wave of men walking into a fog of uncertainty. Some are boys, barely out of their teens. Others are veterans, but none are prepared for this. You hear it before you see it, a deep mechanical hum that grows into a roar. The first British tanks are creeping forward, meant to crush the wire and provide cover. But these iron giants are slow, clumsy, and their effectiveness is unproven. The devastation begins almost immediately. The first wave of soldiers starts to fall within seconds. The German machine gunners open fire, and their bullets scythe through the advancing lines with merciless precision. The air fills with a thunderous, unending roar of gunfire. Bullets whistle past your head. The world shrinks to a tunnel of fear and adrenaline. Men are screaming, but their cries are swallowed by the noise of battle. You just keep moving, driven by pure survival instinct. The ground is slick with mud and blood. The smell of sweat, fear, and death is overwhelming. There's no time to think, only to react. You've stepped into the open space between the trenches, into no man's land, and your world has changed forever. This was the first day of the Battle of the Somme, a day that would become the bloodiest in the history of the British Army. Thank you for watching. If you found this story powerful, please like this video and subscribe for more historical deep dives. The world around you dissolves into a blur of chaos. As you step onto no man's land, the ground itself feels like it's being torn apart. The first wave of soldiers is gone, their bodies lifeless in the mud, twisted into unnatural shapes, or frozen in their final moments of terror. The air is thick with gunpowder, death, and something far worse, a stench that clings to your skin, your throat, your soul. It's the smell of war itself, a smell you know you will never forget. You try to focus, to push aside the horror clawing at your insides, but it's impossible. The relentless rattle of machine guns is deafening. The sharp crack of rifles is punctuated by the distant thunder of artillery, each shell shaking the very ground beneath your feet. Above, the sky is filled with the shrill whine of shells descending like a hellish rain. Then, a bone-shattering explosion erupts nearby. The blast throws you through the air, slamming you into the cold, wet earth. For a moment, everything goes silent. Your ears are ringing, your vision is a blur, and the world is spinning. You blink, trying to clear the fog from your mind. When your vision returns, the scene is worse than you could have ever imagined. The ground is littered with the dead and the dying. Men who were marching beside you just moments ago are now unrecognizable, their faces frozen in agony. But there's no time to mourn, no time to even think. The assault must continue. The generals ordered it. Victory depends on it. So, you get to your feet, shaking off the dust and blood, and you move forward. You've come too far to stop. The soldiers around you are in similar states of shock. Some move like ghosts, others are frozen, their faces pale as they witness the disaster unfolding. The first wave was annihilated, but the second is already on its way. You can see them in the distance, crossing the barren wasteland toward the German lines, marching toward the same fate. The German machine guns, which had been silent during the initial bombardment, are now in full force. You hear their cold, metallic churning as they unleash a hail of bullets into the advancing men. You dive for cover behind a fallen tree, your heart pounding in your chest. The world feels like it's closing in. The officers are screaming orders, their voices barely audible over the cacophony. "Advance," one shouts. You're not sure if it's for you or someone else. All you can do is move, with no clear goal other than survival. The tanks, those lumbering giants designed to break through the German defenses, are failing. Some are hopelessly stuck in the thick mud, while others are being systematically picked off by artillery. The machines that were hailed as the key to victory have become sitting ducks, vulnerable, ineffective tombs of steel. By now, the German defenses are fully revealed. They withstood the barrage and were waiting, their machine guns trained on the advancing British. As you look around, you see more men fall, their bodies collapsing like marionettes with their strings cut. The ground is slick with blood, and the bodies seem to pile up around you. The sheer weight of the death is suffocating. Shell lands nearby, and you dive into the mud just to survive the blast. You feel the heat on your face, followed by the shockwave that ripples through your body. Your world spins once more, but you're alive. You rise, disoriented but not broken. The Germans, seeing the scale of the advance, are responding with deadly precision, their machine guns cutting down men like grass. But the British keep coming. Despite the horrific casualties, the men push on, tired, scared, but driven by the singular purpose of advancing the line. Some are veterans like you, their faces caked in mud and sweat, their eyes filled with a mixture of fear and resolve. Others are fresh recruits, thrown into this meat grinder with little more than basic training. In the distance, you can see the German trenches, fortifications of stone and earth, the very positions you must take. As you make your way toward them, the Germans turn their guns on you. There's no retreat now. For some men, the toll is too much. They break, running for their lives, their fear overriding everything. But you press on. You move cautiously, keeping low as you approach the German line. You know that once you cross this open space, there is no going back. The machine guns are waiting, trenches are waiting, and you will either conquer them or they will conquer you. As you get closer, you hear the telltale click of a rifle being aimed. You look up just in time to see a flash of fire and hear the unmistakable crack of a bullet. It misses you, but it's a terrifyingly close call. You duck back down and press forward, inch by inch, praying for survival. The deafening roar of machine gun fire is all around me. The air crackles with the sharp staccato of bullets cutting through the fog of battle. I instinctively duck, pressing myself as close to the earth as possible. I can feel the tremor of each shot, the vibrations reverberating through the ground. Each one a reminder that death is waiting for the slightest mistake. But there's no choice now. I have to move. The German defenses, though battered by artillery, are still standing firm for comfort. I can see the barbed wire stretched across no man's land and the shattered bodies of British soldiers who never made it this far. Their bodies, torn apart by machine guns and shrapnel, tell the story of just how unforgiving this day has become. Around me, the rest of the advancing troops are in chaos. Some are running for cover, some are pushing forward with grim determination. But most seem lost, consumed by the sheer horror unfolding around them. And yet, despite the overwhelming casualties, there's an unspoken bond that keeps us moving. We have no choice but to press on. In the distance, I see the first of the German trenches' massive, well-fortified positions dug deep into the earth. The Germans, entrenched behind these walls of mud and steel, are waiting, knowing that once we reach their positions, we will meet a horrific fate. But what choice do we have? For most of us in this second wave, retreat isn't an option. To turn back now is to accept certain death. I keep my head down, forcing myself to ignore the bodies and the screams of the men who never made it. I am alive for Nayland, that's all that matters. The sound of shells falling is a constant presence in my ears, and I hear the faint, eerie whistle of another incoming bombardment. For a moment, time seems to slow. I'm no longer sure where the danger is coming from, only that it's everywhere. The ground shakes, a massive blast ripping through the earth just a few meters away. The force sends me sprawling again, my body crashing into the mud. The world spins, and I feel the burn of the explosion on my skin. But there is no time to recover. I push myself to my feet, my heart pounding, adrenaline surging through my veins. The day is far from over, and I am still alive. I keep moving forward, one step at a time, my eyes fixed on the German trench ahead. But as I close the distance, the enormity of the task becomes apparent. The trench system is vast miles of reinforced positions, lined with soldiers, machine guns, and artillery pieces. They are waiting for me. They are ready, and they are not giving up without a fight. I make it to the first line of German defenses, where the barbed wire proves a cruel barrier. My comrades are already hacking at it with wire cutters, their hands shaking, but their determination unwavering. I can see the terror in their eyes as they struggle to break through. I know it's only a matter of time before the German gunners open fire again. They know our tactic, they've seen it before, and they are ready for it. I crawl beneath the wire, the sharp metal scraping against my uniform, tearing at my skin. The mud clings to me, and for a moment I lose my bearings, the weight of the world threatening to crush me. But I push forward, forcing my hands to grip the earth, pulling myself through. Once I'm through the wire, I stand up, gasping for air, the realization of what I've done hitting me in a wave. I've made it, but there's still more to go. I glance to my left and see a soldier, barely a boy, running toward the trench. But just as he reaches the German position, a burst of machine gun fire tears through the air. His body jerks violently, and he falls, lifeless, to the ground. His body lands just inches from mine. I stop, breath caught in my throat, unable to look away. It's a sobering moment. The reality of what I'm up against is as clear as ever. There's no turning back. I press forward, inching closer to the trench, my eyes locked on the enemy position ahead. The sound of the guns never stops. It's a constant barrage of noise, punctuated by the screams of the wounded, the cries of dying men, and the distant rumble of more artillery. I've been here for hours now, and yet it feels like the battle has just begun. I approach the trench cautiously, staying low to the ground, and I see that the German soldiers are in position. They're crouched behind the reinforced walls, waiting for the right moment to strike. But as I get closer, I realize something that makes my blood run cold. The Germans aren't just waiting for me. They're firing with precision, their machine guns cutting through the advancing British forces like a hot knife through butter. I'm caught in the open, with no cover. It's the most vulnerable position to be in, and I'm surrounded. And yet, against all odds, I move forward, determined to do my part, no matter the cost. The line between survival and death is razor thin, and with every step, I wonder if this will be the moment when it all ends. The battle rages on around me, but my focus narrows. I've crossed into the heart of the storm. There's no going back now. We're getting close now. German positions are just ahead. All around me, I hear the frantic cries of my comrades. Some are shouting, urging us on, while others just go silent. The initial push is slowing down. The momentum is gone. Now we're seeing the full force of their defenses. I hear it, that unmistakable clink of metal on metal, grenades being thrown from their trenches. Then the horrifying roar of explosions, debris flying everywhere. The ground trembles again as shells hit, and the trench walls start to crumble around us. I just keep moving forward, my body acting on pure instinct. The air is so thick with smoke and the stench of death. Everywhere I look, there are bodies. Some are barely recognizable, their limbs twisted at unnatural angles, faces frozen in pain. It's almost too much to take in, but there's no time for pity. I know that could be me at any moment. In this world, survival is just a game of sheer luck. There's no rhythm to this fight. It's just chaos, a storm of fire, screams, and men desperately trying to stay alive. The sound of artillery is deafening, but it's drowned out by the scream of more incoming shells. Just when you think you've found a safe spot, the ground shifts and a new wave of violence erupts. I can't even think straight. The noise, the confusion, the constant barrage, it's like being in the heart of an inferno. My senses are completely overwhelmed. I finally reach their trench, but the horror doesn't stop. The moment I look over the edge, I'm greeted by the staccato clack of a machine gun. It's coming from deeper inside. Its heavy rounds rip through the air and I drop to the ground, my heart pounding in my chest. For a second, time just stops. The world blurs as I crawl forward. praying I can make it to a shell crater for cover. But the trench is alive with movement. German soldiers, their faces grim, desperate, are crouched behind the walls, firing back at us. They have their own men down, but their fire is relentless, holding us off for now. I spot one of them, an enemy soldier just a few yards ahead. His rifle is raised as he scans for movement. I move as silently as I can, staying low, every nerve on high alert, waiting for the right moment. Then, suddenly, I'm not alone. A fellow British soldier, so young, with fear in his wide eyes, climbs over the trench wall with me. We don't say a word. He's already drawing his bayonet, his hands trembling as he grips the cold steel. I raise my rifle and notice my own hands are just as shaky. Duh! The weight of this moment is unbearable. And then, the enemy soldier spots us. A flash of recognition crosses his face, but before he can fire, the world erupts. I pull the trigger, the recoil almost knocking me over. The soldier in front of me drops. It doesn't take long for the fight to descend back into pure chaos. The Germans are everywhere. The trench is a deadly maze of narrow corridors and fortified positions. I can barely keep track of who's firing at whom. There's no time to think. I just keep moving, engaging any enemy I see, knowing that with every step I'm getting closer to the heart of their position. And yet, the further I go, the more I realize how much further there is to go. The trench system seems endless. Every step forward is a battle in itself. I've lost all sense of time. Has it been hours? Not days. The sun is hidden behind thick clouds of smoke. All I see is this endless horror. Exhaustion is crushing, but it's overshadowed by the raw adrenaline that fuels my every move. I know that to stop now is to die. Another explosion rocks the trench, sending dirt flying. I dive for cover, barely avoiding the blast. I hear shouts in German, then more gunfire, but I can't see who's speaking. I just know the fight is turning. They're not retreating. They're reinforcing their positions, digging in, waiting for our next push.
Our assault!
Once so full of optimism is now a desperate struggle. The plan, which seemed so simple back in the war rooms, is unraveling. The soldiers, tired, bloodied, and running low on ammunition, are finding it harder to keep going. The machine guns, the barbed wire, the artillery, it's all too much. The casualties are mounting by the minute. As the first hours of the battle tick by, it becomes clear that victory is slipping further and further away. But I keep going. I'm driven by something deeper than just survival. My friends, my brothers in arms, are relying on me. I can't let them down. This feeling of unity in the face of all this destruction, this unfathomable loss, it's what keeps me pushing forward. For a moment, I wonder if this is what they had in mind when they sent us here. To die for something greater, for a victory that seems so distant it might as well be a myth. But there's no time for those thoughts. The war won't wait. As the sun dips behind the smoke-filled horizon, the fight rages on, with no end in sight. For me, for the men who have fallen, and for the ones still marching forward, there is only the next step, the next moment to survive. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, please consider subscribing for more content like this. Hours have passed since you first crossed into no man's land, but it feels like you've been fighting for days. The battlefield is a hellscape, a vast expanse of craters and mud where the only thing real is the unrelenting violence. The ground is slick with blood, the air thick with the acrid smell of cordite, sweat, and death. You've lost count of how many men have fallen beside you, their names and faces blur together in a haze of grief. And still, there's no sign of retreat. The trench systems ahead are an endless maze, stretching to the horizon. Each turn only takes you deeper into the heart of the German position. The enemy is everywhere. Their machine guns are relentless, their artillery precise. For every foot you gain, it feels like you lose a mile. The Germans are dug in, and they know their lines better than any of us. They don't need to take risks, they just need to hold. But now, as the afternoon wears on, something is changing. The constant pounding of British artillery, which had been ongoing for weeks, finally lessens. The last shells of the bombardment fall silent. For a moment, there's an eerie calm. You hear the wind, the faint cries of the wounded, and the distant sounds of men reloading. Just as quickly, the calm is shattered. The Germans open fire again, but this time, it's not with the machine guns you dread. It's something new, something more terrifying. The sharp, piercing whistle of mortar shells cuts through the smoke like a death sentence. The explosions are devastating, their concussive force rattling your bones.
Ow.
You scramble for cover, but each round lands with devastating accuracy. A blast from the right sends you sprawling, the shockwave knocking the breath from your lungs. When you regain your senses, the world has changed again. The trench you were fighting to take is no longer defensible. The Germans have countered, their reinforcements arriving in force. You see men from your battalion falling back, their faces pale with terror. But there's no clear order to retreat. Lines are disintegrating. The British advance collapsing like a broken dam. Officers shout orders, but their voices are lost in the chaos. The men in the front lines are no longer soldiers. They are survivors. And yet, you can't stop. Instinct drives you forward. Your legs ache. Your body is drenched in sweat and blood, but you keep moving. The Germans, though pushing back with ferocity, are also feeling the strain. The exhaustion, the bloodshed, it's taking its toll on them too. But they are not retreating. Instead, they are reinforcing their lines, bringing in more men, more weapons. It becomes clear this is now a war of attrition, a battle to outlast one another in a hellish game of survival. There will be no victors today, not truly. A shell explodes nearby, shrapnel spraying into the trench. You feel the sting of it against your skin, a sharp reminder of how fragile your survival is. You turn and see a fellow soldier crumple to the ground, his body torn apart. There is no time for grief. The battle continues.
For we mare with the Cephali for
You are a cog in a machine that has long stopped working, but you continue the motion: shoot, reload, advance, fall back. Nightfall brings no peace. The sky remains choked with smoke. The first wave of soldiers, so hopeful hours ago, has been decimated. The second wave is faltering. Casualties are mounting, and the line between victory and defeat is fading into insignificance. The battle for the Somme is no longer a tactical maneuver, it has become a grim, unrelenting slaughter. In the distance, the British artillery begins again, but it's weaker now. The shells fewer and farther between. The momentum is gone. The will of the men is waning. You find yourself crouched in a shell crater, your rifle resting in your hands. Your uniform is ragged, caked with mud and blood. Around you, the trench is littered with the fallen men who, like you, had once believed this battle could end the war. But as you peer over the lip of the trench, you see the grim truth. There will be no easy victory. There will only be loss. The final hours of July 1st, 1916 tick away, and with them, any hope for a swift resolution. It becomes clear that the deadliest day of World War I is not just about the number of casualties. It is about the futility of the attack, the miscalculations of the generals, and the endless cost of human life. The hopes of a breakthrough have been dashed on the unforgiving reality of modern warfare. If this story moved you, please consider sharing it. Subscribe for more historical accounts that bring the past to life. Thank you for watching. As night falls, the battlefield is a nightmare. The British assault has failed. The air is thick with smoke and the stench of death. Cries of the wounded echo in the darkness, a haunting symphony mixed with the distant rumble of artillery. I'm huddled in a shell crater, my body aching, my breath ragged. The constant noise of fighting has faded into a heavy, unnatural silence. But the images in my mind are deafening. The faces of my comrades, now lifeless in the mud, their blood staining the earth. There's no time to mourn, only to survive. I climb out of the crater, my rifle feeling impossibly heavy. The ground is littered with the dead and wounded. What was once a coordinated attack is now just chaos. The British lines are broken, our momentum gone. This was supposed to be a decisive breakthrough, but it's a disaster. The hope of victory has been crushed by the grim reality of this slaughter. I see another soldier nearby, his face pale, his uniform torn. He's trying to move, but he's exhausted. Is it over? He whispers, his voice trembling. I don't know how to answer. For us, the living, maybe this part is, but for the fallen, the war will never be over. I give him a weak nod, a small, hollow comfort in a place that has none. The night offers no rest. Field hospitals are overwhelmed. The cries of the injured pierce the darkness as we sit in silence, trying to process the chaos. By morning, the true cost is horrifyingly clear. The British have lost nearly 60,000 men in a single day. It's over 20,000 killed. The dead are stacked like firewood, their bodies disappearing into the mud. The green fields of France have become a blood-soaked wasteland. The scale of the carnage is just incomprehensible. The attack was a catastrophic failure. The German defenses held. We gained almost nothing, and the price was far too high. As I stand among the survivors, a heavy fog settles over my mind. My body is numb. I'm alive, and that feels like a twisted victory. But what kind of victory is this, when so many have fallen? I look at the faces around me and realize none of us are the same. We've witnessed something that will haunt us forever. The Battle of the Somme wasn't just the deadliest day of the war. It was a brutal lesson in the horrific cost of conflict. No one truly wins in war. It's not the generals, not the soldiers, and certainly not the families who will never see their loved ones again. For those of us who survived, there is no glory, only a quiet, unspoken question that will linger for the rest of our lives. Why? The days after July 1st, 1916 brought no relief. The battlefield still reeked of death. Even though the wounded were moved back from the front, their screams and the terror in their eyes haunted the rear lines. The hospitals were overflowing. Some men, still conscious, begged for anything to stop the pain. Others, too far gone, just slipped away. The survivors, the men who had lived through that first day of the Battle of the Somme, were forever changed. You could see it etched on their faces, the horror of what they'd seen. It wasn't just the soldiers. The entire British war effort was shaken. The generals, the masterminds behind this grand offensive, were now staring at the grim reality of what they'd done. As the full scale of the disaster became clear, the British High Command had to face a catastrophic failure. Their belief that a single massive bombardment would simply smash through the German lines was tragically wrong. The German defenses, though battered, held strong. The new wonder weapons, the tanks, had failed to deliver on their promise. And the men, the thousands of men who went over the top and were cut down in no man's land. They were now just statistics. Their sacrifice was a brutal lesson in the high cost of miscalculation. The aftermath was a period of bitter confusion. The generals were slow to admit they'd failed, stubbornly clinging to the idea that victory was still within reach. But as the weeks dragged on and the bodies kept piling up, it became brutally obvious that this battle would not be won easily. The British were forced to rethink everything: their tactics, their strategy, their whole understanding of modern war. The Somme had exposed all their flaws, their reliance on outdated methods, their underestimation of the enemy, and their failure to adapt to the realities of industrialized warfare. The war was no longer just a fight for territory. It had become a grim fight for survival, where every inch gained was paid for with the blood of young men. For the soldiers who survived, the weeks that followed were a blur of confusion, exhaustion, and grief. The shock of what they'd witnessed began to sink in. They thought about the men who had been right beside them, the ones who fell in the charge, the ones who died in their arms. And they started to wonder if any of it had any meaning. Was it worth it? What was the point when the cost was so devastatingly high? These questions echoed in their minds, but there were no answers, and there was no time for reflection. The war machine grinded on, relentless. The British, still determined to push forward, continued their assaults. The Battle of the Somme would drag on for months, but the hope of a quick, decisive victory was gone. shattered on that first day. The battle that was meant to break the stalemate only deepened the bloody divide, leaving behind a field of ghosts. Soon whispers started spreading through the ranks. Whispers of anger, of doubt, of betrayal. The men who survived that first day were no longer the same hopeful soldiers. Their optimism was replaced by a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. The camaraderie that had once bound them together was now tinged with a bitter sense of futility. They talked about the generals, the men in far-off chateaus who had never seen the front, never felt the mud, never heard the screams. Did they really understand the cost, the tactics? Sending wave after wave of men into machine guns seemed like a cruel, senseless joke. As the battle continued, it became clear there would be no grand victory here, only more death, more loss. Looking around at his fellow soldiers, a man would see the same blank expressions, the same vacant stares. These men, once full of life and hope, were now just shells. They moved like automatons, their eyes empty. Some found solace in silence, others in quiet prayer, but all were consumed by the sheer weight of the loss. They had seen the worst of what humanity could do, and it was now a part of them, woven into their very being. The survivors were left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. They tried to keep going, to keep fighting, but something inside them was broken. They realized this war, once framed as a noble cause of duty and patriotism, was something far darker. It was a war with no end, no meaning beyond the endless, industrialized slaughter. For those who fought and survived the Somme, the question remained, when will it end? The Somme became a symbol of the brutality of modern war. The horrors of that first day, the bodies, the screams. The endless barrage of shells would be forever etched in the memory of a generation. The blood that soaked the fields of northern France wasn't just the blood of soldiers. It was the blood of a generation lost the blood of a war that took far too much and gave far too little in return. Thanks for watching. If you found this glimpse into history meaningful, please like and subscribe for more stories like this. Weeks pass, but it feels like the world has stopped turning as the battle rages on, but time itself is frozen in this scarred, cratered landscape. The ground, once fertile, is now just a barren wasteland. The green fields are gone, replaced by the remnants of war, broken bodies, shattered equipment, and the relentless whisper of the wind carrying the cries of the wounded. Our forces, though exhausted and devastated, keep pushing. But the days have all blurred into one long, continuous nightmare. The excitement and hope from the first assault, that's long gone. It's been replaced by a grim acceptance. This isn't a battle of skill or strategy anymore. It's a battle of endurance. Who can last the longest? Every day is the same. Men are pushed into the fray, sent over the top, and fall in numbers that my mind can't even comprehend. The push for victory has lost all meaning, buried under the weight of so much sacrifice. For me, every moment in these trenches is harder to bear. The body is worn down from the constant strain, my mind frayed from the horror I've witnessed. This war started as a fight for our country, for honor. Now, it's just a fight for survival, a desperate struggle to see another sunrise. The names of the men I fought beside are starting to fade. They're being replaced by the faces of the fallen, faces I'll never, ever forget. The line between the living and the dead has blurred, and sometimes I'm not sure which side I'm on. The generals, far from the mud and blood, still believe victory is possible. They keep pushing the assault forward, seemingly blind to the staggering losses. The casualty reports grow by the hour, yet the offensive drags on. So we march weary and broken. Some have given up hope entirely, resigned to the idea that their lives mean nothing in the grand scheme of this endless war. But others, like me, still cling to the smallest shred of hope. The hope that if we can just survive this, if we can make it through this hell, there might be something left worth living for on the other side. But deep down, I know the truth. There is no glory in war. There are only survivors and the dead. And with each day, the scale of the sacrifice becomes more apparent. The names of those who fell, their stories, their families, their dreams, are slowly being forgotten. The war doesn't care, just moves forward with its own brutal momentum, claiming more lives, leaving more shattered souls in its wake. As we press on, the German forces counterattack. Their resolve hasn't faltered. Their defenses remain unbroken. With each passing day, our efforts feel more and more futile. They aren't retreating. They're fighting with everything they have. They're soldiers just as determined as we are. The battle lines shift, but only by inches, not miles. Casualties pile up, and the dead, once buried in shallow graves, begin to outnumber the living. It's in these quiet, broken moments between the fighting that the full weight of the cost of this battle settles in. This war will never be the same. Neither will I. The world might eventually move on from the Battle of the Somme, but for those who fought here, for those who witnessed this brutality, it will never be forgotten. The memories of the fallen, the images of men marching toward their doom, will be carried forever in the hearts of the survivors. The pain, the grief, the overwhelming sense of loss, it will live on, etched in my bones, in the very fabric of my soul. As the days stretch into weeks, then months, I've come to understand something fundamental. No war is ever truly won. Some may claim victory on paper, count the dead, and call it a success. But for the men who fought in these trenches, men like me, it's clear that the real cost of war can't be measured in numbers. It can only be felt in the silence that follows the battle, in the emptiness of the heart left behind by those who never came back. Thanks for watching. Please consider subscribing to learn more about these pivotal moments in history. The Battle of the Somme officially ended in November 1916, but its shadow would stretch far beyond the battlefields of France. For the British, the cost was staggering, with nearly 420,000 casualties. The Germans suffered even more, with losses exceeding 500,000 men. First day, July 1st, 1916, became an infamous symbol of the sheer brutality and heartbreaking futility of the Great War. It was a conflict that, despite its so-called victories, left no real winners, only a generation of dead and wounded. For those who survived the mud, the shells, and the terror, the war was far from over. Physical injuries could be treated, the wounds stitched. But the emotional and psychological trauma lingered long after the guns fell silent. These men returned to their homes, but they never truly came back. They were different, haunted by the faces of friends they'd lost, by the constant fear, and by the overwhelming sense of hopelessness that had defined their lives in the trenches. They were a lost generation, forever changed by what they had seen and endured. The Battle of the Somme wasn't just a catastrophe of human loss. It was a harsh and bloody lesson in modern warfare. It brutally exposed the deep flaws in military strategy, the tragic cost of using outdated tactics against new, devastating weaponry. Generals who had learned warfare on horseback were now sending men against machine, guns and artillery that could tear them to pieces from miles away. The battle highlighted a fatal underestimation of what modern industrial warfare was truly capable of. But more than any strategic lesson, the Somme forced the world to confront the true price of war. This price isn't measured in miles of territory gained or enemies defeated. It's measured in lives. The lives of young men, cut short in their prime. The lives of the families back home, forever shattered by grief. The lives of the survivors, who would carry the weight of those bloody fields for the rest of their days. It is a cost paid in human suffering, a debt that can never be repaid. Looking back at the Somme a century later, the same questions echo through time. Was it worth it? For the soldiers who charged into a hail of bullets, for the families who received that dreaded telegram, could any objective, any strategic gain ever justify that level of sacrifice? History continues to debate these questions, and perhaps there are no easy answers. But one thing is certain. The echoes of the Somme still resonate today. They serve as a solemn, powerful reminder of the profound human cost of conflict. Thank you for joining us for this episode. If you found this story moving and want to explore more pivotal moments from our past, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. There are so many more stories to tell and so many more lessons to learn from the echoes of history. We'll see you in the next one.